What cannot be skipped in this story is the fact that Drake's dad said to Drake's mom, do not let our son near Brian for any reason. That guy is a predator. Don't let him be alone with him. Don't let him spend too much time with him. That guy is constantly hanging around our son. There's something weird about that guy. Don't let it happen. He said this to her face, not in a phone call, not, in a letter, but to her face to let her know, I'm very serious about this. But the problem is, you can say that, but if your ex-wife already hates you and she already thinks this Brian guy is perfectly fine, because Brian was amazing at making people think he was perfectly fine, how much are you really going to pay attention? You're just going to be like, oh, you've been ousted because of your bad attitude. So don't come to me and tell me that Brian's terrible. Enough already. So the mom did not take that warning seriously at all. And the mom was the worst person to manage Drake because she doesn't want to be involved. She doesn't want to drive him to auditions. She doesn't want to. They live an hour away from all of this. And so Brian, knowing exactly what he was up to because he is a master manipulator, tells Drake, oh, it's okay if your mom doesn't want to drive you down here. Look, I'll take you to your auditions. I'll do it. It's totally fine. I'm more than happy to do it. I'll come pick you up. But those auditions, they go pretty late. So why don't you just crash on my couch and I'll bring you home the next day. So this becomes his cycle where he's going to auditions or working late. And his mom, who doesn't like to drive and definitely doesn't want to drive an hour to LA, decides that this seems like a fine arrangement. She totally trusted Brian. Like if there was ever a person who Brian had pulled the wool over her eyes, it was Drake's mom. Brian always wanted to do fun stuff with Drake as well, take him to Disneyland. Brian was super supportive of Drake's music career, always coming with all of his friends. No matter where Drake went, even if it was hours away, Brian would show up. And at the time, Drake says that he just looked at it as, oh, my friends are here. Because working at Nickelodeon, his friends were friends of all ages. All the cast and crew spent all day together. There wasn't necessarily this feeling for him that age delineated friendships. That these are my friends and then those are the grown-ups. Everybody was together all the time. So his alarm bells weren't going off the way they should have gone off. Because all day long, he was talking to the grown-ups almost as though they were his equals. So what was it to him if Brian showed up? Feeling like he was safe with Brian, it never occurred to him that he should distance himself. Up until this very point in the story I'm about to tell you about, there weren't for him red flags the way there had been for his dad. But one night, he's spending the night at Brian's house. He's on the couch. And when he woke up, he found Brian with him. And Brian was absolutely taking advantage of him. And he didn't know what to do. He didn't have a car. He hadn't driven there himself. And what's he going to do? Get on the phone and be like, hey, mom, this just happened. Brian just did this to me. Can you come pick me up? I'll just sit on the couch and wait for an hour with this predator while I wait for you to come get me. Like, he didn't know what to do. He was 15 at the time. So he didn't say anything. And it just became this secret. And Brian, of course, was really apologetic about it. Like, sorry, man, I didn't mean to do that. It's just like, it just happened, But it's like, don't be scared. Don't be worried. I totally crossed the line, but it's never going to happen again. It happened again and again and again and again and again and again. And it got worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And Drake, it's so sad. He cannot talk about it. And we don't need to hear all of it. We don't. I mean, it would not edify even one of us to know about the details. But he says he's trying to figure out a way to talk about it as he discusses how terrible things were getting and how the abuse was escalating. And he's shifting in his seat and he's so uncomfortable. And he says, I don't know how to talk about this on camera. And he keeps trying to find his words and he can't. And she says to him, the interviewer says to him, well, whatever you're comfortable with. And he says, and you can see he's agitated, not at her, but just there's an anger to what he says because the situation is so wrong. And he says, why don't you do this? Why don't you think about the worst thing somebody could do to somebody else in a sexual assault? And there's your answer.
Elaborate on that on camera, really.
Whatever you feel comfortable or you think will help.
Why don't you do this?
Yeah.
Why don't you think of the worst stuff that someone can do to somebody as a sexual assault, and that'll answer your question.
The camera doesn't cut away from him after that either. He's still shifting in his seat, trying to figure out what he's supposed to do with this information and what we're supposed to do with this information, you know? And so he says that these secrets were plaguing him, but he couldn't tell anybody, I don't want to go to Brian's house anymore. Because if he says, I don't want to go to Brian's house anymore, well, what then? Now all the adults are going to start asking more questions. Well, why don't you want to go to Brian's house anymore? You guys are really good friends. Wait, what happened? And he doesn't know how to say what happened. And so Brian's just relentlessly abusing him in all the worst possible ways you could abuse someone. Eventually, Drake gets a girlfriend. Thank God, there's somebody else's house to go to where no one's going to question why he wants to hang out there all the time. So he starts hanging out at the girlfriend's house, and he says that the girlfriend's mom picked up in 6 seconds what was going on. So one day he is at the girlfriend's house. There had been plans to go to Disneyland with Brian. They did that a lot. That was something that they enjoyed doing. But now that he's with his girlfriend, he doesn't want to go over there. And thank God he has a reason now not to go. And so Brian starts calling his cell phone, but he doesn't pick up because he knows what it is. He knows Brian's like, hey, where are you? We're here. You're going to come, right? No. So he doesn't pick up. Brian's blowing his phone up. Ring, ring, ring. It's just like going on and on and on. Then he leaves off the cell phone, starts calling the girlfriend's house relentlessly. The phone is like ringing off the hook. Well, this is embarrassing. So Drake picks up the phone and tells him, hey, I know I said I was coming. I've double booked. And I'm just going to hang out here, but you guys have fun. Brian does not take that well. He rips into Drake and is so angry, super mad. So Drake just hangs up. Like, what? Is he going to keep having that conversation? So then the house phone continues to ring off the hook some more. Finally, Drake's girlfriend's mom says, Drake, can I talk to you in the kitchen for a minute? And he talks to her, and she says, what's the deal with this? What's going on? Are you okay? Drake's like, yeah, he just wanted to go to Disney World. It's okay. He's just a little bit weird sometimes. And Drake's mom's like, no. A guy in his 40s does not call my daughter's boyfriend over and over and over and over and over. And that is supposed to be called normal. That is insane behavior. And she says, are you okay? Is there something happening? And he does not articulate to this woman what's happening, but he does say, yeah, it's just kind of awkward. He's getting a little weird. So it's just kind of hard. I don't really want to spend as much time with him as I used to, trying to figure out a way how to not spend as much time with him, but he just isn't taking it very well. So this really scares the girlfriend's mom. So she calls Drake's mom and says, I'm taking Drake to our family therapist tomorrow. Something is happening. He needs to talk about it. So they take him to the therapist the next day, but unfortunately he isn't able to verbalize what's happened. He doesn't know how to talk to this strange therapist about it, and he doesn't know even how to talk about it. And as he says in the documentary, he's like, I don't even to this day know how to talk about it. I've only talked about this in therapy as an adult, but I still don't know how to verbalize what happened to me. So I certainly didn't have the tools at the age of 15. So he just goes right back into the life he's been leading. Meanwhile, he is now on a spin-off show where it's this buddy comedy, and he and this other Nickelodeon character are playing these brothers. It hasn't been shot yet. They shot the pilot, but it had to be reshot. And this whole time, Brian has been in Drake's ear being like, hey, tell Dan that I should be the dad on that show. Tell Dan, let's see if I can get to be the dad on the show. Wouldn't that be great? We could work together all the time. Drake's like, hell no, that wouldn't be okay. And he keeps telling Brian, no, come on, no, just don't. It's not your thing. And finally, he just starts getting agitated. And I think just being able to have an adult pick up on the fact that something wasn't okay kind of broke the dam. Like, he didn't verbalize to the therapist what had happened. He didn't tell his girlfriend's mom what had happened. But having somebody pick up on something isn't right here stirred up in him this ability to say something, because he says these secrets were so intense and he thought that nobody could see that something was going on, because certainly no one was acting like they could figure out something was going on, that he just felt like this was something he was going to have to live with. And he didn't know how. But to have another adult say, something's not right, I don't know what it is, but something's wrong, galvanized him. And he says he doesn't know what happened the day that he decided to tell his mom. He said he was on the phone with her, and then the dam broke. And he was just screaming down the phone line everything that had happened to him with Brian. His mom immediately calls the police and gets him to the house. The police come and interview him at the dining room table, and he's laying out everything that happened in gruesome detail, because the police aren't the therapists. They're not going to sit around and wait for you to find the words. And then they've got to get Brian to admit it. So they have Drake call Brian, and they are taping the whole conversation. And Drake gets Brian to admit to everything that he's done by saying, hey, I know you said you'd never let this stuff happen again, but I'm really struggling with it now. Why did you do those things to me? Why? And so they start cataloging all the things that Brian did. You know, Drake's like, well, why did you do this to me? And why did you do this to me? And Brian's not denying it, but he does feel scared that the call is being recorded, and must have said dozens of times, is this being recorded? Is this being recorded? Or, you know, of course it was being recorded, but Drake managed to get a confession out of Brian. And so the episode ends with Brian being convicted, though not, the sentencing is in the next episode. But what is so shocking about the very end of this story, and definitely on into the next story, we'll really get into this in major detail, is the fact that Brian was well connected in Hollywood. And he ran the gamut of all of his friends, and he said, I have been falsely accused. Please come and support me. This child is saying all these terrible things about me. I didn't do any of those things. He's just making it up. Please support me. You know, write letters of support to the judges. Please be there with me on the sentencing day. I can't believe that my reputation is being maligned like this. You know me. You know I wouldn't do any of these things. It's completely against my character. And all of these people who had not ever been at the hands of Brian Peck believed that he really was being falsely accused. They say they believed it. And we will definitely dig into this next episode. But just as a sort of preview of that, one of the things that I find so shocking about these letters of support are how many times adults said in their letters of support, Brian didn't do this, but if he did, it's because somebody tempted him beyond anything he could experience. So he fell to temptation. That sentiment or sentence is repeated over and over and over and over and over in scores of letters. What kind of a logic is that to say, oh, well, if Brian did hurt this 14-year-old kid, it's because the 14-year-old kid tempted him beyond something he could handle, so he gave in. You're going to blame the 14-year-old kid? Are you kidding me? And all of these adults in Hollywood did. What I think is reprehensible is the fact that all of these people who stood behind Brian Peck, who voiced their support for him, either written support or verbal support, or were physically in the courtroom during sentencing, all of these people have refrained from coming to Drake and saying, I am sorry that I didn't believe you. I am sorry that you had to sit in the courtroom with no one but your mom and your brother, while the other half of the courtroom was full of people who supported a child predator. There are people who have come out and been like, oh yeah, I wrote a letter, but I didn't really realize what Brian had done. There are people who have gone on podcasts and said, yeah, if we'd known, we never would have been in there supporting him. We just had no idea. Or we were listening to the testimony in court, and then we realized we had supported a monster, but we didn't know it before then. But not one of those people have come out and tried to reach out to Drake Bell and say, hey, I am really sorry that at the pinnacle of your pain, you had no friends by you. Not one of those people have come out and said anything to him. And they could find him. You know, it's not like one of us being like, well, how would I reach out to Drake Bell? They're all running in the same circles. Hollywood is a twisted place. And so the way I'll end this is by saying, if ever a person has a intuition that somebody else is a frightening, scary, or evil person, follow that intuition. There's no reason to give everyone the benefit of the doubt. Trust but verify, my friends. And Drake's dad never, ever, ever would have allowed this to happen to Drake had he been the one at the helm. You know, he trusted his intuition. And because he was forced out by a lot of other people who would rather have fame, money, and glory, then Drake was molested at the hands of somebody who his dad had pinpointed as the problem. The real sad part of this story is that when Brian was convicted, Drake called his dad and said, "Hey, did you hear they got him?" And his dad said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "They got Brian. Brian has been convicted. He's a predator." And his dad said, "I am so grateful that he never got his hands on you." And Drake didn't tell his dad at that time that actually he's been convicted because of me. Because his dad was a very emotional person, and Drake at the moment couldn't handle his dad's pain at hearing that news, so he didn't say it. The dad obviously knows now, shortly later, obviously during sentencing and everything, it came to light that Drake was the John Doe. And his dad's pain talking about it is so visceral. I mean, he wept, as any of us would if this was our son, and just said the pain that he felt on hearing the news that his son had been so terribly, terribly abused is still with him to this day. He'll never get over the pain that he felt on hearing that. And especially when he had taken such pains to make sure that didn't happen to his kid. To then find out that it not only happened, but it happened at the worst scale that has ever been reported would have been news that you could hardly handle.